In letter B, I want to take our starting function and I want to first shift it up 4 units, which just means we put plus 4 on the end. So I'm actually going to write that down before I forget it. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and simplify that so that there's less things to look at. So I'm working with root x plus 3. What I want to do is I want to basically take this function and I want to reflect it across the x-axis, which means upside down. And if we want something to be upside down, we basically take the opposite sign of all the items in the problem. All right, so let's see how we did our work. So right here is our starting function, the square root of x minus 1. We're first going to be shifting it up, right? 4 units. Well, if you count up from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, that puts us at a y-intercept of 3, which is what I have in this picture. So if I said, hey, write me the equation of that square root function, you would say, oh, well, it's root x plus 3, right? Because the intercept's at 3. Oops, go back here. Right, so really what's going on behind the scenes is if we're not looking at a picture and we're working with the starting function, we add 4, the 4 and the negative 1 become 3. And then the last thing is I want this to be upside down. So here's what that would look like. Okay, so instead of being 3 high, now it's 3 low. And if I asked you for this formula, you would say, well, it's upside down, so it's a negative root x, and the y-intercept is at negative 3. So I get negative root x minus 3 or plus negative 3, which is what I had in my previous answer. So that works. Right? Letter C, that one's really tricky. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to horizontally reflect this. So left to right, that just means you change your x into negative x. So I will have the square root of negative x. I do not change my y-intercept, so that's still going to stay the same. Here's where you got to be careful. Normally, if you're shifting right or left, all right, to shift right means to subtract 2. But because you're reflecting, you're essentially working backwards horizontally. So instead of the graph going to the right forever, now the graph's going to the left forever. So what does that mean? Any shifting we do left or right is going to be negated or opposite. So just think of it like, well, if I'm working with a backwards graph, then I should be working with backwards rules. So if I see shift right after I horizontally reflected, that actually does mean plus 2, like you would imagine it would. So inside my square root, I'm going to have negative x plus 2. And then outside, I still have the minus 1. And just so you can see what's going on, oops, and I don't know why that's there. I think my pen drew on there a little bit. You go to the picture. There's our starting graph. First thing I'm going to do is flip it so you can see that that's flipped. And if I asked you for that formula, you would tell me it's negative root x minus 1. And then I want to take that picture and I want to move it over here. So if I asked you for the formula to this graph, you would see, okay, well, it's definitely shifted 2 to the right. All right, and it's still down half 1. It's still down 1 space, but it is shifted 2 to the right from the origin. And the negative x implies that we are looking backwards left to right. So I know that's weird. I get that that's confusing. Just think if we're backwards horizontally, then our rules for horizontals are backwards. Verticals, we're off the hook. It's the horizontals that are the ones that cause issues. Right? And then last but not least, we want to shift this guy right. Now, it's not reflected or anything, so it's a normal right shift. So we actually do truly want to subtract 2. And then we're going to reflect it about the y-axis. So what does that mean for us? That just means we change x into negative x. We don't change the minus 2. We just change the x to negative x. And once again, if you want to see what's going on, all right, there is the shifting right 2 units. So if I asked for the formula for that, you would tell me it's root x minus 2 minus 1, because it's also down 1 from what it started. And then the last one, if I want to flip it backwards, the only rule is, okay, you have to change it into, oops, negative x.